Okay, so welcome everybody, welcome all our Torah Time viewers. Okay, tonight we are learning Ilu Nishmatu Rachel Bat Yisrael and to Avram ben Chaim Yehuda and Yecheskel ben Abraham. I don't even know where to begin because I know this is a controversial topic, and just for the fact that we couldn't use our regular Zoom, and we have to, while this was all happening and we couldn't use our regular Zoom, I was thinking, well, you know what, maybe I shouldn't speak about this. Maybe this is a sign from Hashem that I shouldn't speak about that. But at the same point in time, I'm like, maybe this is the Yetzer Hara doing it. So how do you know how to read these signs? So if you want to know how to read the signs, please refer to the class that we spoke previously on how to read the signs, which is what came into my mind when I was when I was thinking this. But it's really, I really apologize for everybody who tried to join us on the Zoom meeting and let's say didn't make it. We had a last minute change that we had to go through. This is why the best way possible to go and join the classes is through the WhatsApp, the women's only WhatsApp to get the information for the live classes. Because we're already making announcements, we got to give a shout out to dailygiving.org. I don't know why. I really don't know why this is coming out right now, but for whatever reason, I strongly recommend everybody to go and look at the www.dailygiving.org, an amazing organization that I'm strongly behind, supporting wise, and they do phenomenal things. And one thing I do want to mention that I mentioned it a few times, that every time people reach out to me and they say, you know what, I heard you say it so many times, but I forgot to do it. So now that you mentioned it again, I remember that I'm going to do it. So just as a reminder, in case you didn't, in case you forgot, or in case you never heard about it before, please go to dailygiving.org, an amazing organization. Again, they're not sponsoring anything, they're not paying anything. I happen to be very close with the founder, but it has nothing to do with what's going on right now. I just think it's a phenomenal organization, and I think it's a big, huge zechut to be a part of and to spread. So not only you go and look at it, into it, and hopefully sign on, but hopefully get your friends, your family, your neighbors to go and sign on with it. Okay, so now to the topic at hand. There's no other word to say it other than, I was going to say crazy, but I can't. And I was going to say crazy in a way, like crazy cool. Not like for the conspiracy theories that are crazy. Chas v'shalom. I'm really not, if I insult people that believe in these things, that's not my intent. We are going to be speaking about conspiracy theories. We are going to prove that they are not authenticated. I'm really trying to use my words, wisely and correctly. But my intent is really not to insult anybody, and really my intent is not to, hurt anybody. It's really just to get that information out there, the correct information. That is. Now, I might get heated. I'm just going to warn you right now. I tend to get heated about certain topics, and certain topics like these tend to really, and I've really been pushing off speaking about this. I really didn't want to speak about this, but the more that I see of the information that goes out there, the more of the misinformation that goes out there has really been very troublesome, and it became to a point where, like, should I speak about it, should I not speak about it, to almost to a point where I felt like I have to speak about it. Not because I'm anybody, I know I'm a nobody, but just to clarify on what certain things mean and how do you interpret. It was like so many clarifications that needs to happen. So the way that we're going to structure this class, B'ezrat Hashem, is part of this is going to be dealing with the conspiracy theories, and part of this will be dealing with the vaccine. And one thing I want you to keep in mind, that a lot of these conspiracy theories that the Jewish people go and they believe and they spread, unfortunately, they morphed from what used to be conspiracies against the Jews themselves. And we're going to see how it goes out. So, whoever's not familiar with conspiracy theories, please don't research this. It's just going to be a waste of your time. You could either, skip to a different class, or, you could skip to the end where we speak about the vaccines. But there is really no reason to go and look into conspiracy theories, because they're really not based off any evidence. Now, and I'll give you some examples of what we'd like to speak about, or we'll see what we get to. There's a conspiracy theory that goes on that there is no coronavirus. There's no such thing. Coronavirus, there doesn't exist. no one ever saw the coronavirus. Or better yet, where speakers go up and say, I never saw the coronavirus. So how are people sick? So it's very, very simple. And again, I know it's going to be coming out in a degrading manner, but I really don't mean it to be in a degrading manner, so I apologize if you do get offended. But the way that people feel that you got sick, if you have the coronavirus, that's because of something called the 5G networks. So the 5G networks are these towers that they sort of zap you with COVID. And that's how you get sick. And if you're already sick and now you need to get the vaccine, you're going to get the vaccine, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be injected with a chip and they're going to track you. And they're going to listen to you and they're going to care about everything that you're going to do. And they're going to tell your doctor how many bowel movements you had and what you ate and what was your calorie intake and output. Then they're going to give you everything from A to Z. And it's going to be horrendous. And who is controlling all this? Of course, it's none other than the New World Order. Who is in charge of whatever. We'll get to that later. To the point that there is a huge, huge movement right now. And if it would be just in the non-Jewish world, then fine. I wouldn't even bother to go and speak about it. But unfortunately, it crept into the Jewish world where the Qanon, where you see people holding the big Q signs. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. This is where they feel like there's a person or a group of people that are government officials that they leak information. And what is one of their theories? That there is a huge, high-ranking underground group that they kidnap children and they drink the blood of the children to live longer. Now let me repeat that. But before I repeat that, let me just remind people, especially the Jewish people, what happened many, many, many years ago in something that was called the blood libels, where the Jewish people kidnap a Christian child. I don't know why I'm using air quotes, but the Jewish people kidnapped a Jewish child and they took his blood or her blood and used it for the Pesach matzot. Now all of a sudden, if you ever stop for a second and think, all of a sudden this morphed into, no, it's not the Jewish people. Now it's the high elite. What they're doing is they're kidnapping children and they're using their blood to go and to live longer. Now, if this was just theories, then fine. But this is no longer just theories. People are actually, if you ever looked into the news, people are going armed into stores to shoot up to save the children. Now, they have righteous, mindsets behind it. But look at how far this has been going. Look how far this theories have been going to it. Now, not everybody might not believe in all of it. You might believe in part of it or some of it. There is something that creeps into the Jewish population. In fact, it doesn't even matter for the Jewish population. It's to everybody, because this really does affect everybody. Where you believe maybe a part of it. And that part can have a very, very drastic effect. Now you have public speakers, unfortunately even Jewish people, that what they're doing, and now I'm using air quotes, they're educating you. And this is where I get very, very, I can't say upset, I don't know, frustrated. I'm sure it's my own issue. I need to work on it myself, but it really boils my blood, if I could say that. Where they start off with saying things like, you can't argue with facts, and they're just reporting facts. And I've listened to these lectures and I've listened to these classes and don't tell me you're saying facts, because over 60% of what you are just saying is not facts. It's conspiracy. What facts doesn't mean that you saw it on YouTube. I can't begin to, just because you saw it on YouTube, it does not make it a fact. It does not make it news. If it's in the news, it must not be true, because the news always lies. But if I saw it on YouTube, now that's a source that I'm going to trust. Then it must be true. There was one interview that was going on where a conspiracy theorist was arguing with somebody, and this conspiracy theorist goes and says, there are many articles to go and to prove what I'm saying. And the person that was interviewing them was not a conspiracy theorist, and they said, tell me please, we've been searching for it. Where is it that you found these articles? Who wrote these articles? And you know what the conspiracy theorist said? I wrote the articles. They're bringing proofs from things that they wrote up themselves. This is not even peer-reviewed articles. This is something that they wrote themselves and say, here's a proof. It's like somebody that's going and saying, hey, by the way, an alien landed in my backyard and gave me this book. You want to know the proof? I have an article to prove it. Who wrote the article? Oh, I wrote the article. I'm sorry. Like, did I miss something in how to do research? Did I miss something in how to, this is where you're getting it? So that's, one of the many problems. You have another problem where everybody who owns a video camera, nowadays you don't even own a video camera, you own a phone, it doesn't matter, and you have a little bit of a beard, all of a sudden you're a rabbi. Everybody else who owns a video camera and a YouTube account is the following. And please listen carefully because it's very important because you have to understand how these people gather their information. So people that have a video camera and a YouTube account, they're all of a sudden they're scientists. Not just any scientists. They're cellular and molecular biologists. They have a high level of biochemistry and microbiology. They're also virologists. They are also epidemiologists who are people who are not familiar with what I'm talking about. These are people who determine how to control and prevent viruses, or diseases from happening. But not only, these people are also telecom engineers. They know how 5G works. They're also expert in nanoscience and nanotechnology. How are you going to figure out how to implant a chip? They're also specialists in selfology, which is the quantitative analysis of elections and balloting. Of course, election fraud, and we can't throw that out. They have a doctorate of law and pharmacology. They're also sociologists, and they're fluent in, philosophy and political theory. These people, do you realize how much geniuses we have? Where you have people that have video camera, and all of a sudden they understand everything. Doesn't matter when you have a doctor who went to medical school, who spent 13 years plus or whatever in school and specialties focusing on viruses and biology and microbiology, but you know better. Why? Because you watched 10 hours of videos on YouTube that proved with facts that the virus is not real. Are you kidding me? And you know how? And by the way, if you haven't realized until now, I'm kind of sarcastic at this point. You know how you know if a video is real? If it says, you better watch this before they take it down. Who's they? That's the New World Order, where they will control you, or they will kill you, or maybe they will kill you and then control you. Wherever this comes from. Absolutely no evidence. No evidence, but they have all these issues that come up. Now, granted, there are many, many people with power that want to do harm and they want to manipulate the people. I'm not denying those facts. But you have to come with evidence. And evidence does not include videos from YouTube and does not include articles written by people that have absolutely no background in that, or that they have been discredited from whichever foundation they've been coming from. You know what? There are so many problems that comes from conspiracy theories. First of all, it causes unwarranted fear. As a people, this doesn't have to do only with the Jewish nation. There are so many people that are they're full of anxiety. How are they going to pay the bills? How are they going to pay their rent? How are they going to pay their mortgage? How are they going to pay the credit card bills? What are they going to do with their health? How are they going to get married? Now that they're married, how are they going to deal with that? How are they going to deal with the children? There's so many things that's bothering them. And now you're putting into them conspiracy theories. One thing is, if it's true, then fine. If it's warranted, if it's based off evidence. But if it's not based off evidence and you're causing people unwarranted fear, you know what a level of punishment that incurs in heaven? Why are you scaring people with things that are not true? Why are you spreading information that is false, that is not based on evidence? Now, we can only base our things off evidence. That's how we have and we'll speak about this later, B'ezrat Hashem, the fact that we can only judge what we're going to do based off the evidence that we have. We can't base it off hearsay. We can't base it off things that people make up or think that they've seen. We have to see the real evidence. And you know the problem? When people go and they present this misinformation, it causes people paranoia. People can't sleep at night. You might think of it as a passing video, but other people can't sleep. Other people have anxiety attacks from it. Now, not only is this misleading information, this could also lead to matters of life and death. If there was something that we could have done, but due to conspiracies, people refrain from taking proper precautions. Maybe they start taking, medicine that is unproven. Maybe they start ignoring public health advice. Maybe they start refusing to take certain vaccines. And by the way, it's not only related to coronavirus. There's so many things that could be a problem from it. And I don't know how somebody could go and take it upon themselves to present this information, to spread this information, that it's not based off evidence, and people are scared. Now people are even more scared, and people are just, it not only it fears them and brings them anxiety and depression, but it could also make them sick, and chas v'shalom, God forbid, it can make them pass away because they didn't take the proper precautions. How do you have that ability to go and spread something that's not based off proof? Now, Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of speakers that spoke about this in the negative aspect. They've taken down their videos. But there was a damage that was done. What are you going to do with the damage that was done? And that's why it really bothered me. It really, really bothered me, and I was really contemplating about it, giving this class or not, on how much this information is spread and how much problems people don't even realize what it caused. Because you could have a mindset of like, okay, it bothers me, but it's not so bad. But you don't know what other people's mindsets are. You don't know what other people are going through. The second that you say 5G, people are now panicking. They can't use their cell phone. They can't use, they can't walk near towers. They're burning towers now. There's so many things that are happening that are causing these issues that are based off nonsense, that are not based off evidence. If you show me evidence that is real and authenticated, then yes, you have 100%. We should all spread it out. So we have to start realizing now, we have to figure out what is it. Conspiracy theories have always been going on. It's not something new to our generation. Why all of a sudden, now it's been gone to such a high level, to more than it has ever done before, if I believe in the history of the world. So we have a few things we have to consider. First of all, there is a very, very big mistrust in the media. And the truth is, it's rightfully so. You see a lot of fake news that's going on, where the news companies manipulate the news the way they want to see it. And we see it very obvious, for example, in Israel, where they portray Israel, certain news companies portray Israel as being the bad people. Meanwhile, they're most humane, democratic state in the entire area, but yet they portray them as bad. And we can see it, it's very obvious. Things that are fake are sent in the news. So all of a sudden, even though it's rightfully caused, you have a distrust in the media. Why should I trust the media? You know what I'll trust? I'll trust in the YouTube. Even though it doesn't make any sense, but it makes more sense because why would they lie? Then you have also a mistrust in the government, especially after the election, where many people feel that the election was stolen. And I'm not going to get into that, what I think about that. But the bottom line is, you have a majority of people do believe that the election was stolen. So all of a sudden, there's a mistrust in government. And granted, there may be some warranted reasons for that. The problem is that, especially when you speak to the Jewish, communities, the mistrust in government is not only based on this. There's a long-stemming history of, anti-Semitic policies that comes from our, the lands that we were previously in Europe, in Russia, where people are very against Jews, where people made it very obvious, the government, made it very obvious that they didn't like Jews, and there was very, very large anti-Semitic policies. And because of that, we're sort of very, very prone to be like, why should I trust the government? And you have, especially after the Holocaust, where there were experiments on Jewish people by the Nazis in Machshemon. So you have all this. So even we have this mistrust. There are so many times where you have, philanthropists where they're trying to do well, but because of what people think that it's a new world order, they feel that I can't trust them. And what they're doing is really bad. And even though they're trying to do good, they portray them as very, very bad. And you have over here what is something that's known as the infodemic. And the infodemic is something that, there's something that's called as overabundance of information. And because some is accurate and some are not, it's very difficult to find a trustworthy source. So you don't know where to actually go and what to actually believe in. And unfortunately nowadays, especially when you're putting all this together, the conspiracy theories have exploded in popularity. You have over here, an MIT study that was done in 2018, where they showed that fake news travels 6 times faster than real news. Do you understand that? So if something is fake, they will travel faster. And according to the YouGov Cambridge Globalism Project, there was more than a quarter of people in the United Kingdom and United States that subscribe to at least one conspiratorial COVID belief. And it's really mind-boggling on how much it goes. Now, I don't blame anybody for falling into this. It's very easy to fall into this. You have people that are not working. They're spending more time at home, and they're searching for answers. They want to look for answers. And unfortunately, if they don't do proper research, and many people, unfortunately, are not aware on how to do proper research, not aware of which articles to read and which articles not to, which videos to watch and which speakers to stay away from, so they can be led to a very, very, unfortunately, dark path. Psychologist Stephen Lewandowski was from the University of Bristol. He's a cognitive scientist, and he studied why people think, and he studied the way people think and why people engage in conspiracy theories. And he saw that when there is a global event that causes people to feel that they lost control over their life, that's when all of a sudden conspiracy theories come out. And he said that there's something very interesting. Pandemics give conspiracies a push for centuries, where you have people are feeling powerless. People are going and they feel like they have no answers. So conspiracy theories, they offer some relief. And this is what Daniel Joliet, he's a psychologist at Northumbria University. And I quote him, "Everyone is susceptible to conspiracy theory. Where feelings of anxiety and uncertainty bloom, conspiracy theories may be quite appealing." Because you know what? It gives you some sort of psychological comfort. That there's a handful of people that are causing these bad things. And therefore, it's controllable. And if I get rid of them somehow, or if I fix them, then I'll fix this entire situation. So you feel like you can control it. This is what happened with the bubonic plague, the Black Death. You know that between 1347 and 1350, the church blamed the Jews for the bubonic plague. And anti-Semitism escalated during those times. And thousands of Jewish communities were massacred because of that. Because sometimes you need to feel the blame. You need to put the blame on it. And you know what? It didn't only last over there. It's also in our day and age. You know there are many, many conspiracy theories that are going around. The Jews are the cause of COVID. Jews, and you know what's going on? The Jews are the ones that are seeking world domination. This is the new world order that people think that they're blaming it on Bill Gates or whatever. Not. The other people are blaming it on the Jews. Dr. Daniel Freeman, a professor of clinical psychology at the University of Oxford, said that more than 1 in 5 English people believe Jews are cause of the pandemic. Do you understand that? And now we know we're not. Now, it's very obvious that we're not, but the facts don't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Because no matter how much you can prove it, and it's very, very easy to prove that the Jews are not responsible for this. Because if the Jews are responsible for this, then how come there's so many Jewish deaths from this? In Israel alone, unfortunately, there's over 5,000 deaths. There's over 700,000 that were sick from COVID. That's in Israel alone. I'm talking about America or other places in the world. So why are so many people sick? So it's very easy to go and prove and say, look, the Jews are not going and they're not involved in this. But you think that goes into the brain? No, because the conspiracy theories don't work based on what's facts and what's evidence. The Turkish politicians, they gave also an accusation that the Jews are somehow involved in the virus. And not only that, that some say that the Jews are behind the pandemic. Fatih Erbakan, he's the son of the former Turkish Prime Minister, Necmettin Erbakan. He says, and I quote, "The Zionism goal is decreasing the number of people." There are many Jewish speakers that go out there and they say that, you know what, because the New World Order wants to go and decrease the number of people. They want to reduce the population. Well, you know what the Turkish is saying? That's the Jews. The Iranian television is going and saying, and they're openly accusing Zionist elements. They're saying that the deadliest strains of coronavirus against Iran is a virus proof that Israel is waging biological warfare against Iran. This is the conspiracy that theories are going on. It's not just one conspiracy. Everybody is going with different conspiracy theories. And this is, again, it's not something new. We know that unfortunately, a very, very famous anti-Semitic book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was created by the Russian secret police, where the Jewish people have secret meetings to conspire to rule the world. Again, this is the aspect of the New World Order twisted towards the Jewish aspect of it. And by the way, if you think it's so fictional and so far-fetched, Henry Ford in the 1920s, the founder of Ford Motors, he went and he founded the printing of 500,000 copies of this book and distributed it throughout America. So it's not, and a lot of anti-Semitic, repercussions resulted from this. So these conspiracy theories, affect people. And we as a Jewish nation could realize that. In fact, we have been on the other side of the conspiracy theories. To go just through very few conspiracy theories to just, disprove them, debunk them, whatever you want to call. One of them is that the coronavirus was engineered in a lab in China, in Wuhan, China. Now we know that the virus was originated in Wuhan, China, and even though this was a interesting thought to put in, right when it came out, like maybe there was a lab right there, so it makes sense. But all of U.S. intelligence agencies have denied this. And they've come in with conclusive evidence that coronavirus, COVID-19, was not man-made. And there's no credible evidence to support that it was man-made. And not only that, once this came out, that America, whoever was, blamed China. So now China started, making its own propaganda. We're saying, no, you know how this came? The U.S. military brought the virus from America to Wuhan, and they're the fault of it. And then you had the Turkish kid says, oh, it's not American, it's not China, it's Israel that's going. It's everybody's placing blame on somebody else. Now, if you just stop for a second and think logically, why would a government use a weapon like COVID if they can't control it? No government is able to control this. Why would you do it? And if you want to say it's for population control, then why would you pick a virus that has a very low death rate and it focus on the elderly or people that have comorbid conditions? So you want to know what one of the mindset is? That everybody's blaming somebody else. It's America's fault. It's China's fault. It's Israel's fault. It's the Jews' fault. It's somebody else's fault. But why don't we stop for a second and think, you know what? Hashem is doing this to us. Maybe we should stop. Maybe we should do tshuva. Maybe instead of spending 5 hours a day on watching and listening and reading these conspiracy theories, we should maybe learn Torah. Maybe we should go and do a little bit of chesed. But no, we're going to focus the blame and don't do this. The government is very, out to get you and people are out. Everything is bad except for maybe stopping for 1 minute and saying, you know what? Hashem is doing this. Now, why is Hashem doing this? Maybe instead of going and listening and watching the next COVID, conspiracy theory, you stop and you go to TorahAnytime.com. And you go and you start listening to another Torah class. And may it be a merit that you shouldn't get that disease and you shouldn't have fall to any issues. Maybe do something that you can. Instead of blaming other situations or putting the blame on something else, stop for a second and realize you can do something. We're Jewish people, we're ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, we're people that believe that everything is from Hashem. So why don't you stop for a second and realize, what can I do to stop? I could do tshuva. I could learn a little bit more of Torah. I could do something instead of wasting my time and spreading this nonsense. You have, unfortunately, people that are saying that COVID is no worse than the flu. Which, again, I don't know how people are going. Epidemiologists are saying that, and in fact, the Center of Disease Control, the CDC, goes and says that for the flu, there's roughly between 12 to 61,000 deaths per year. COVID so far had over 473,000 deaths just in United States alone. So how is this exactly the same? I don't understand. One of the biggest new conspiracies it's not new, it's pushing out very strongly, is the 5G, especially in the United Kingdom. Again, I don't know how it's holding up at this point in time, but it was pushing very strong. There's no evidence for this. There's no evidence, in fact, that 5G has any impact on your health. And besides the fact that it's biologically impossible for virus to spread using something that the 5G uses, which is the electromagnetic spectrum. 5Gs are waves or photons. Viruses are biological particles that compose of proteins and nucleic acids. They're two different worlds. But, that's how conspiracy theories works. They take something we fear or we don't know, like electromagnetic radiation of 5G networks. We throw in a hidden agenda. There's a new world order that wants to control the population and why it's pushing out 5G networks. And then you throw in the fear of COVID. All of a sudden, mazal tov, you have a conspiracy. You know what happened before 5G? There was a conspiracy with 4G. Before 4G, there was a conspiracy with Wi-Fi. Before Wi-Fi, there was a conspiracy with radio waves. In the early 1900s, they were saying radio waves are going to cause problems. The difference is that now it's picking up because of social media. Things spread very rapidly on social media. But the real question that you really need to ask for people that believe in the 5G networks, and again, I sincerely, if I really do not mean to insult anybody. I'm going to say this multiple times because I really do not mean to insult anybody who believes these things. I'm just trying to present the information, the proper research that you should do and look into. But if you believe that the 5G networks are the cause of COVID, 5G networks are roughly deployed in about 34 countries. COVID is present in over 212 countries. How do you balance that? How do you balance things that are very, very obviously that don't make sense? You have to stop for a second and think, are they feeding you information that that sounds real? Because it's very easy to manipulate information. It really is. In our day and age, it's very, very easy to manipulate information to show it the way that you want to, especially when you're dealing with news, and especially if you have already a false trust in news. And again, it's warranted. All these things are warranted. But you have to stop for a second and think, like, what is the real truth? Where does the evidence lie in? And if you're going to start saying, well, the CDC, the WHO, the government, everybody's out to be against me, then that's already delving into the world of paranoia. That's something that that's not the healthy outlook. That's not where the outlook of the Jewish mindset should be. I would like to go into, at this point in time, a little bit into the vaccines. So in order to understand the vaccines, we have to go a little bit into the history of the vaccines. And I want to start off with the history of the vaccine into smallpox, which is this. If you learn anything about vaccines, this is really where the origin lies. Now, smallpox was a very, very, very severe disease. You're talking about between 20 to 60% of all those infected died, and over 80% of children died from this disease. In 18th century in Europe, you had 400,000 people that died annually of smallpox. And people that survived, a third of them went blind. So during the 20th century, you have roughly, smallpox caused roughly between 3 to 500 million deaths, meaning that this is a very, very serious disease. And it's, by the way, it's not new. They found the traces of this disease in mummies. You're talking about over 3,500 years ago. The way that they try to, treat the smallpox is that they realized that once you had smallpox, you became immune to the disease. So they called the survivors of smallpox would be the ones that were able to go and treat the people that are currently suffering from the smallpox, because they are the ones that have the immunity towards it. Now, there was something that was called a variolation. This is where a process was developed in the 10th century in China and India, where it involves taking pus from the people that were suffering from smallpox and inoculating, or sort of almost vaccinating, healthy people with it. And from that, mild cases of smallpox developed, because you basically took smallpox from one person and you gave it to another person. And once they got it, they had lifelong immunity, but there was a risk for that, and the risk was death. But still, it made it worthwhile, because they found out that between 0.5% to 2% of people died after the variolation. And this compared to between 20 to 60% of people that died from natural smallpox. So they found that this would be a better way to go about and try to protect yourself from smallpox. There was many problems. One of the problems was, there was a disadvantage that people that were variolated, that had this variolation, they could pass on, they had the smallpox, now they could pass on the smallpox to others. So it was a system that was set up, but it wasn't a great system. And all this, there was a huge breakthrough that came out in the year of 1796. And this was by somebody by the name of Edward Jenner. And Jenner did a very, very famous experiment. And he started looking, and he saw that milkmaids, the people that milk the cows, and the shepherds, they sort of came immune to smallpox. And he knew also that the milkmaids, they suffered from small blisters that were similar to smallpox, but were not smallpox. Rather, what happened was that they milked cows that suffered from something called cowpox. And when they got that disease, they all of a sudden became immune to smallpox, meaning that Edward Jenner realized that these two conditions are somewhat related. So he figured that he's going to try an experiment. He's going to try to infect somebody with the milder disease, which is cowpox, and that will protect somebody from the more lethal disease, which is smallpox. So he needed three things over here. He needed smallpox disease, he needed cowpox disease, and he needed a human to be a guinea pig to go and test it. So he went and he found an 8-year-old boy by the name of James Phillips. And he took, he extracted cowpox from a milkmaid, and he gave it, and he made an incision into the arm of, he made a little cut into the arm of an 8-year-old boy, and he put the smallpox into this. He basically gave this kid the disease of cowpox. He waited a few months, and a few months later he went and he injected him with now smallpox. And he realized that this boy did not become sick from smallpox. And he started testing this theory. He tested it on a bunch of people, and he came to prove conclusively that contracting, if you had cowpox, it provided you immunity against smallpox. And this is where all of a sudden the vaccination, world all of a sudden came into being. So this vaccination started, gaining momentum and it gained tremendous momentum in the 19th and 20th century, to the point that in December 1979, the World Health Organization certified a global eradication of smallpox. Because of the vaccination, they were able to eradicate smallpox. Smallpox is one of two infections that have been eradicated. The other one is being the rinderpest. But smallpox was the deadly disease, one of the most deadliest diseases, was completely eradicated. How? Through vaccination. Now, during this time, there was Rav Yisrael Lifshitz, which was known based off his Sefer Tiferes Yisrael. He passed away in 1860. He was the leading Ashkenazi rabbi in the community of Danzig. And he was the author of Tiferes Yisrael, which is a commentary on the Mishnah. And in regards to smallpox, which is otherwise known, he was Ababuot, he quotes the Talmud Yerushalmi. The question was, can you take this vaccination when it came out? Can you go and take yourself the vaccination? So the question is he goes and he quotes Talmud Yerushalmi that it is permitted to take a small, immediate risk to avoid a larger potential risk. Let me repeat that. It's permitted to take a small, immediate risk to avoid a larger potential risk. Now, he goes and gives an example that the Gemara brings down, that one may dive into a river to save somebody who is drowning, even though it places this person at some sort of risk of death. And even though the other person who's drowning may not for sure actually drown. So he brings out a conclusion. If adopting a small risk to save another person is permitted, then kal v'chomer, all the more so, adopting such a risk to save oneself is permitted. And therefore, the Tiferes Yisrael goes and applied the smallpox inoculation that even though at that time it carried a 1 in 1,000 risk of death, meaning that 1 in 1,000 people died from getting this smallpox vaccine. Still, the Tiferes Yisrael says it's worthwhile and it's beneficial that one should go and get the vaccination. Now, in order to understand this, let's try to take a little bit of a detour and look at the Rambam. And there are 3 levels of obligation where you have to remove safety threats. And one of them is imminent and present danger to life or limb, by the way. Number 2 is something that's a low but significant risk of danger. And number 3 is something that it's a low level but a long-term risk to your health or to your well-being. So let's look at the last one. So a low-level, long-term risk to health. The Rambam in Hilchot Deot, chapter 4, halacha 1, goes and says that a person has to maintain a healthy body. And this is a prerequisite to be able to serve Hashem. Because a physically sick person cannot go and serve Hashem. And he goes on and says that a person shouldn't eat unless they're hungry. A person shouldn't drink unless they're thirsty. Which brings me to this. A person shouldn't go and push off to relieving themselves, even for an instant if they have to go to the bathroom. That's category number 1. You have to go and take care of your health. You have to go and do things the correct way. Then you have something that's imminent and present danger to life and limb. The Rambam goes and says this in Hilchot Rotzeach Ushmirat HaNefesh. This is the 11th chapter, the 4th halacha. That this requirement goes to, let's say, if somebody has a roof or a well. So if you have a roof, you have to go and make sure you put a gate around the roof. Or you have a well, you make sure you put a gate around the well that people don't fall down and they hurt themselves. This is based off a pasuk in Devarim, the Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 9. Rak hishamer lecha ushmor nafshecha mod. You got to go and you got to guard yourself. You got to guard your life. And other examples, of more common examples, is don't put a playground near a pool. If you have exposed live electrical wires, you got to make sure you got to take care of that. The final case where there's something where there's a low but a significant risk to danger. And this, if you want to look it up, in the Rambam Hilchos Rotzeach Ushmirat HaNefesh, this is the 11th chapter, again, halacha 5 and halacha 6. That somebody that goes says, I'm not careful about these things. The Rambam says that person should be punished. And they include examples like you shouldn't put your mouth over a conduit, where you have water that's flowing, and you drink it without able to see what the water is. Because maybe you'll swallow a leech without seeing it. This is where the rabbis prohibited also that you shouldn't drink liquid that was left uncovered because it could have been contaminated with a snake. And this is in a time when the likelihood, even back then, the likelihood was very low for a snake to come in and contaminate the water. But still, the halacha was that you have to go and you have to refrain from drinking those type of waters. And the Rama rules that any relevant situations that pose a significant risk to danger, and this includes running away from a plague before it becomes an epidemic, you have to do. And there are some poskim, that have applied this rule into taking a vaccine. We're taking a vaccine against a plague before it happens. This is where it falls into. And Rav Chanan Wasserman goes and brings down that generally a person is allowed to take a risk which is normal in society. This concept is known as Shomer Pesaim Hashem. This is based off a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 116, verse 6. Shomer Pesaim Hashem, it says, the Lord protects the simple people, the unwise people. The concept of this is as follows, that if something is considered a mainstream routine activity, even though it includes a dangerous element to it, an example would be air traveling, going on an airplane, skiing, snowboarding, riding on a roller coaster. They have risk associated with it. But as long as the risks are proven to be negligible, then you could rely on the concept of Shomer Pesaim Hashem, that Hashem will protect you, Hashem will protect these situations. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who passed away in 1986, he brings down a very interesting case regarding the Tay-Sachs disease. So, before there was a development of these certain blood tests that would test between two prospective marriage partners if they would be carriers of the Tay-Sachs disease, he said, before we had this, you could rely upon Shomer Pesaim Hashem. You could rely on that aspect. But all of a sudden now, that we have the ability to test, we have the ability to prevent certain issues, now you can't no longer rely on the concept of Shomer Pesaim Hashem. I'll just do it because that's what everybody does. You cannot rely on this. And this is something also, Rabbi Yosef Shalom Eliashiv, who passed away in 2012, goes and it says, the Gadol Hador says that if people that fail to immunize, this would amount to negligence. And Rabbi Kiva Tatz goes and expounds on this, that people that refuse childhood immunizations on the basis of unsubstantiated fears of vaccines and side effects, this is irresponsible. This is something that's irresponsible. Rav Yishmael HaKohen of Modena in Italy, passed away in 1811, wrote the Shalosh Teshuvos in Zera Emes. When he goes and brings down the question on smallpox, it's interesting what he says over there. He brings down over here, the question is like this. So we're going back to the time when smallpox, the vaccination just came out. So the question is, can you infect yourself with an illness with a very low fatality rate to prevent yourself in a disease with a high fatality rate? But there's a difference over here. The difference is that's min hashamayim. That's from heaven. And this one, you're causing the disease upon yourself. And he goes on, and he says he understands why people go and permit this inoculation. They permit this vaccination. But he didn't want to give a ruling. He was fearful to give a ruling. Meaning that this is sort of like people that don't want to vaccinate. This is a side for that. The Zifrei Tzedek, who passed away in 1889, goes and says that even though the Zera Emes goes and abstains from ruling one way or another, he says now we have expert physicians, people that give vaccinations daily and no one has been harmed. And his disciple, the Kaf HaChaim, goes and quotes the Zifrei Tzedek, and then he adds in that medicine has since progressed. And the physician and he says this is where they started injecting people into the arms with a needle. And this prevents them from contracting smallpox. Now, it seems from the Kaf HaChaim that the vaccination performed at his time did not cause smallpox. And the poskim, in later generations, starting discussing vaccinations, they see that in earlier times, the vaccinations were less safe, were more problematic, and therefore there was some hesitancy, and it was rightfully so to be hesitant. But many, and not everybody, again, I will give it this, but many later poskim and svarim say that this earlier hesitancy is no longer evident. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rav Eliashiv says that children should be vaccinated. This is just a standard thing regarding vaccination. However, the Klosenberger Rebbe says that yes, people should be vaccinated, but he says an interesting caveat, that you shouldn't be from the first 100 people that try to vaccinate. And Rav Shlomo Miller also goes down and says that now, since we have the overwhelming majority of medical experts believe that we need to vaccinate, it's proper to follow their advice. Now, with that information, let's now go into the COVID vaccine. And so now let's get into the where we have the concern of the COVID vaccines. And I do really want to put this out there that even though it's going to seem that I am pushing very strongly for vaccination, I am just going to be presenting the information regarding what the doctors say and what the rabbis say. But from my own personal opinion, speak to your doctor, and also obviously follow the Gedolim. But it's really my own personal opinion. I would like to follow something that Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky goes, and we'll soon see what he says as I quote Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky. Okay, but let's look at the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine, people are nervous. Okay, let's say people have taken the vaccination. But now, the COVID vaccine is something very different, very unprecedented. Maybe I shouldn't take this. So, and I want to answer a lot of these questions that come up, and it's a lot of that comes up from conspiracy theories, and a lot of it that comes up, they're not conspiracy theories, that are just really rightful reasons of questioning this vaccine. And one of it is that it came out so fast. It came out in under a year. People say that it came out, conspiracy theories that it says that it came out in 2 months. It didn't come out in 2 months, but it came out in under a year. And when we know that, especially if you look at this is according to the College of Physicians of Philadelphia, it brings down that the average time that it takes to create a vaccine is 10 to 15 years, makes you question, be like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to take a vaccine that was created less than a year when it usually takes 10 to 15 years? So I would like to answer on how it came about and how it happened. And during this time, I have to actually say a shout out and a thank you, because one of the doctors that I spoke to was Dr. Alan Nordman from Switzerland. So just a shout out from there, from doing my research on these, and the doctors that I speak to. That's one doctor that I actually was asking a lot of questions to. So just a shout out to him. Thank you very much for your help in just clarifying a lot of things. So, and by the way, that's how somebody should do research on something that's medicine. Ask a doctor, do research on doctor. Don't look at somebody on YouTube that may wear a lab coat, but that's just because they're an institution that requires them to wear a white, clothing. But in any case, so when you look at the coronavirus, that it went so fast. So how did it go? How did it go through? How did it go so fast? First, I want to preface this by saying that the coronavirus went through the same layers of review as other vaccines. It didn't skip any processes. So let's see how it went so fast. First of all, there was the genetic information of this disease was shared, and yes, even by China, and it was shared when it was available. And it was something very interesting. The nations around the globe united together to sort of fight against COVID and sharing a lot of this information. Now, people call it a novel coronavirus. This is something that is a new virus. It's true that it's a new virus, but it's not new. The family of viruses was very, very well known to the infectious disease specialists. This is not something that is a new virus per se. The family was very, very well known, the family of viruses. Scientists, in fact, are already researching potential vaccines for other coronavirus. And I'll give you an example. SARS is also from the family of coronavirus. MERS is also a family of coronavirus. And because there was so much research done on those vaccines, they didn't come out yet, but almost vaccines, they were able to apply a lot of what they learned in those vaccines and those coronavirus into our currently coronavirus that we have right now. And you have people that go and they claim that I don't understand. There are diseases, for example, HIV, which has been around for so long and they haven't been able to create a vaccine for it, but yet they're able to create something in a few months for this. And the answer is it's two different things. HIV is a chronic illness. COVID is an acute illness. There's two different categories. You cannot compare something that's acute to something that's chronic, something that's a long-term lasting for something that's short-term lasting. So an HIV, a chronic illness, is much more difficult to develop. But before we get into the difference and how they developed it, we first have to discuss the different types of coronavirus vaccines that are currently under development or currently that have been approved. So the most famous that we are aware of is the RNA/DNA vaccine. This is a type of vaccine where they take genetic materials and they copy it. They copy the virus to make the vaccine. So it sort of mimics the natural infection. Then you have something that's called the protein subunit, where this contains protein that are taken from the coronavirus, and this produces an immune response. So again, just before we even go further, the way the vaccine works is that you insert something into the body that will produce an antibody response. It's sort of they will fight this response. So the next time that the body meets, it's sort of like training. You train the body by saying, hey, by the way, here's, you're going to lift this and it's only going to be 10 pounds. The body says, I can do 10 pounds, not a problem. And it starts lifting the 10 pounds. And it sees those 10 pounds. And the next time when the body gets bombarded with a bunch of these 10-pound barbells coming from all over, the body knows how to fight it because it already created the protection, the warriors to go and fight this vaccine. So that's how technically the vaccine works. So then you have another vaccine called the viral vector. The viral vector doesn't contain the coronavirus. It contains a different virus that is either dead or weakened, but includes genetic material from the coronavirus. You have another type of virus, which is the weak or inactivated virus. This is a very famous type of virus. This is commonly used for the flu. This is where they take a weak or dead virus and they put this virus into the body, and that stimulates a person's immune response. And then finally, you have something called the VLP, which is a virus-like particle, which mimics the structure of the virus, but doesn't include any genetic material in the virus. So you have a bunch of different companies trying to produce a bunch of different vaccines based on these different, categories of vaccinations. The Moderna and Pfizer COVID vaccines, these are made up with the RNA type of vaccine. And I just got to put it out there because people think that if you take this, it's going to change your DNA. There is absolutely no evidence to support this. The RNA does not become part of us. It does not become part of our DNA. The way that it works is it's the mRNA. M stands for messenger. So it's a messenger. It's sort of like a message that comes into your cells. And what it does is it instructs the cells to produce something that's the spike protein. And this is found on the surface of the coronavirus disease. So once the cell makes the spike protein, the cell then breaks down this mRNA into harmless pieces. At no point does the mRNA go into the cell's nucleus, which is where the genetic materials, where the DNA lives. So it doesn't change your DNA. It just goes into a certain point. It gives you the information and then it breaks down. Now the difference of this, people are thinking, okay, maybe the older way is better. There's something very, very amazing about this type of vaccination. So for older vaccinations, where they have given weakened or inactivated dead viruses, what happened was that you had the ability of getting that virus. And examples would be the measles or the polio vaccines. So they give you a weakened form of the virus, so in very rare cases, it can cause the disease. So the mRNA technology is something that it doesn't give you the disease. In fact, it's medically impossible for somebody to get COVID by getting the vaccination. It's something unbelievable. It's amazing. And by the way, people say, okay, this is new technology. This is not new technology. This technology, this mRNA technology, has been for years in development. And in fact, it's not only been studied, it's been used in cancer and other vaccine developments. It's not something that's only novel to this. It is a new vaccination regarding the coronavirus, but it's not by all means a new technology. It's something that has existed before and something that has been used before. The way that people think about it, be like, wait a minute, this is a very big problem because it's new. But the real situation is that not only it's not new, it's more beneficial than other vaccines. Now, you have still people that feel symptoms. They have, after they take the vaccination, they feel some sort of symptoms. These, and one of those symptoms is like fever or muscle aches. This is actually good. It's actually beneficial because this means that your body is doing an immune response. It's not an infection. It's something that the body is actually producing the immunity that it needs to. Now, because of social media, this enabled companies to study vaccines. So social media here worked for the benefit as well. They were able to get a wide sample of people to go and see if this vaccination works, which is something so amazing because the vaccine trials, the tests that they have to put on vaccines, usually takes years and years and years. And you have to recruit a lot of participants, and to be able to go and figure out the right participants, to evaluate its safety, to evaluate its efficiency. There's so many things you have to do it. And not only that, after you get the participants and after they get vaccinated, now you have to wait for them for the natural infections to take place. Meaning that if you want to see if a vaccine works, so you give somebody a vaccine and then you expose them to the vaccine and see if they get the vaccine. Now, because the prevalence of the virus in the community was so widespread that you had many people that took the vaccine, they were exposed to the virus and they did not get the disease. And this is where it brings me to before actually we get to that, we have to go and we have to discuss the how is the traditional vaccine testing process different from this one? If you have a company and the company wants to go and produce a vaccine, what is the process that you have to go through? So the process is as follows. First, you have something that's called the discovery phase or the exploratory phase, where scientists go and they study the structure of the virus and how it causes the disease in the body. Once they have that information, this allows them to identify the potential ways of creating an effective vaccine. This process usually takes several years. And by the way, listen closely, because here I'm going to show you how the vaccine was able to go and come out very, very quickly and not take the normal 10 to 15 years. So the discovery phase usually takes several years. But because of the new technology that allowed the genetic makeup of the coronavirus to be shared with researchers worldwide, in just a few, literally right after the first cases of COVID came out, the genetic information, the genetic makeup was shared with everybody. And so this sped up the process extremely fast. Once scientists then go and they select and they start figuring out this, they start studying this disease and they select which type of vaccine is the most promising. Then they go and they create that vaccine in the lab. Then they go into a stage that's called the preclinical testing. The preclinical testing is something that's done in the laboratory. And this, they first start testing on cells, and then they start testing on animals. And if the vaccine creates an immune response, they move on to the next stage. But you should know many vaccines don't make it past this stage because they don't prompt an immune response. If they don't prompt an immune response, then there's no point of going further with it. But let's say they found a vaccine that does create an immune response. They go on to something that's called the clinical trials. The clinical trials are divided into something that is called the 3 phases. This is regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And there was something very interesting. Regarding the cases of COVID, all 3 phases were planned simultaneously. Usually the way that it works is that each phase is planned out after the previous one is completed. Because companies, nobody wants to put so much money behind a vaccine that won't be successful. So first you start phase 1. If that's successful, now let's start planning phase 2, and then we'll go to phase 2. Now, if that's successful, let's start planning phase 3, and because the creation of vaccine is very, very expensive. The difference over here with the COVID vaccine is that all 3 phases were planned simultaneously, and we'll soon see why and how. Now, how are these 3 phases? What characterizes these 3 phases? So the first phase of the clinical trials is where you have usually less than 100 people. You have 20 to 100 people that join this trial, and they test to see if the vaccine is safe, the best dosage, and by the way, this is with consent. They usually get paid for this. It's not based off something that whatever, I don't want to get to the conspiracy theories. They are the full consent and they fully understand what they're getting into. This phase usually takes several months. About 70% of drugs move on to phase number 2. Phase number 2 is where you have a larger study. Here's where we have, before the phase 1, we had under 100. Now you have a few hundred volunteers. And again, the scientists go and they figure out the proper dosage, the proper schedule, the proper method of delivery. They look at all these things. This phase takes between several months to 2 years to complete. And you have only about 33% of drugs that make it out of phase 2 into the next phase, phase 3. When you get into phase 3, you go into even a larger study where it includes thousands of volunteers. You have thousands of volunteers. And this phase can take between 1 to 4 years. And only about 25 to 30% of drugs make it to phase 3. So as you can see, it's very expensive because a lot of vaccines don't make it all the way out. And unfortunately, what you have a lot of conspiracy theories that are coming out and saying that don't run to take the vaccine because you are the guinea pigs. You are the ones that are getting tested. You are the human testing. And this cannot be further from the truth. Moderna went and they had, before they rolled out with the vaccine, they had more than 30,000 participants that tested in this. Pfizer had over 43,000 participants in this. So this is not the first time. This has been very, very well tested, this vaccine. What goes on next after we go into phase 3, then if the trial is successful, then the manufacturer, either in this case Pfizer or Moderna or any other companies, they will submit something that's called a BLA form. This is called a biologics license application, and they submit this to the FDA. And the FDA starts researching this. If there is evidence that it is effective and it does no harm, the FDA approves it for general use. But if the vaccine is not proven, and by the way, the FDA looks for evidence that the vaccine is not safe, that it's ineffective, that it has side effects, and that it outweighs the benefit, if it finds any of these things, it does not approve the drug. What happens afterwards? Let's say he passes that, and the FDA says, okay, you're good to go. Then they start manufacturing. So manufacturing begins when phase 3 have already been planned. So the process of after the vaccine is approved, the CDC, which is Centers of Disease Control, and the FDA, they continue to monitor this, this vaccine to see if it's really safe and if it's something that needs to be done. Now we have to speak about a very, very important aspect, and that is the money aspect of it, where vaccines are very, very expensive. Each step in the testing requires a significant amount of financial investment. So how is it now that you have all these companies that put so much money into this and maybe it wouldn't go through? So the government and nonprofits poured billions of dollars into these companies to sort of tell them, and what they did is that to not only do the research, but they started the manufacturing even before it was approved. Meaning that this is actually a point of concern maybe, because the companies went and they started manufacturing vaccines before the vaccines were approved, and they started paying for it. Why did the government do this? Because they wanted to cover vaccines. The pharmaceutical companies don't want to pour billions of dollars into this. So the government says, don't worry, we'll cover the loss. We'll pay for you. And what happened was that in certain cases, the vaccines were not approved. And you know what happens? The government bought it up. It didn't go into into the environment, into the community. The government went and the government took the hit from this, because the government knew that if we want to get out of this virus, we have to pour in billions of dollars into it, and that's what they did. And there was so much things that they poured into it to make it go faster. So you have all these scenarios over here where instead of waiting, the pharmaceutical companies had incentive to just keep on going 3 steps ahead of the game. And if it didn't fail, so they discarded that, but they didn't lose money from that at least. So they went and they had the ability, the opportunity to go and produce the vaccine, do the research vaccine, and pour in a lot of money because they didn't lose the money from it. And because of that, they were able to go and get a vaccine so fast. So they were able to take what usually takes 10 to 15 years, they were able to cram it into less than a year. And that's because they had a financial backing for it. And that's because they had the resources, they had the social media, they had the ability to go and do it. But don't think for a second that the safety repercussions were overlooked. One of the biggest things that I personally see is who are the first people that are taking this vaccine? The healthcare professionals. The people that spend the entire life working and understanding and studying the medical background. They're the first ones that are taking these vaccines. Don't you think that even if there was a havamina, even if there was a reason not to take the vaccine, they're the first piece of people that shouldn't take it? But yet they went and they took it. So now we see that the vaccine was produced in a safe manner. Now again, I'm just giving you over the information. I'm giving you the information as was properly researched through the proper sources. What's going to happen in the future, I can't tell you. And not only that, I can't tell you what to do, but I want to present you the proper research. And with that, I want to share with you and how the rabbis approach this. So the way that the Rabbanim, and I know we're going way over than the regular because we started late, so still Please bear with me, we're almost done. The way that the rabbis go and deal with medical situations is that majority of rabbis are not medical experts, they're not doctors. So how do they come to conclusions, do this or do that, or don't do this and don't do that? The rabbis rely on the scientific data available. And let me repeat that. The rabbis rely on the scientific data available. That is evidence-based practice. That are things that are based off evidence and proven facts, not based off hearsay or warranty or theories. And this is not something that's new to nowadays and age. This is always, has been. This is also that includes when you have people that are at life risk, where you have to desecrate Shabbat. Shabbat is one of the most important aspects of Judaism. And the rabbis go and they base off if you have to desecrate Shabbat and what the doctors say. So the rabbis have always been looking at the scientific data available through the scientific experts of the times. Whether it's a time of the Gemara, whether it's the time of the Mishnah, or whether it's in our day and age. And by the way, the rabbis just don't give some sort of ruling just off the top of the head, which really bothered me, where I heard where somebody went and said that the rabbis are corrupt or the rabbis are fooled. That is so false, and it really, really, really bothered me. That's not how rabbis come to their conclusions. And I want to share with you a story of how the Chazon Ish comes to a conclusion. Somebody came over to the Chazon Ish, and they came over to the Chazon Ish with a non-pressing issue. And they asked the question, what would happen if this would come out? Meaning that it was a hypothetical case that came over to the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish says, listen, when the situation comes back, then you come to me, and I'll go and we'll figure out what to do. But the person says, no, but theoretically speaking, what should I do if it comes out? So the Chazon Ish stopped him and he says, what do you think happens over here? Do you think that I just give advice that just rolls off my tongue? The Chazon Ish goes and says, I mull over the issue many times. And I think of all the long-term and the short-term effects, of all the long-reaching effect of the decision and the short-term reaching of the decision. And I invest time and energy to make the proper decisions. The way that a rabbi goes and makes a decision is not just based off just like one doctor, what they said. The rabbi goes and focuses on what is the potential outcomes from all angles. And then they come to the decision. To say that the rabbis are fooled is something that really, really bothers me. Because the rabbis speak to especially the Gedolim, they speak to the specialists. They don't speak to a regular local, pediatrician or, general medicine, internal medicine doctor. They speak to the specialists of the field. And when you look at that, what did the rabbis say, the Gedolim say regarding the vaccines? And majority, not only of the rabbis, majority also of the doctors. You look at the rabbis, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, Rabbi Gershon Edelstein, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, Rabbi Mazuz, Rabbi David Yosef, Rabbi Chacham Shalom Cohen, the Admor Mevizhes, the Admor Megor, Rabbi Asher Weiss, Rabbi Melech Firo, you all say the same thing, that you have to take the vaccine. Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky even said that it's a must. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef said that it's obligatory. Rabbi Meir Mazuz goes and says that any allegations against the vaccine is imaginary evidence. And you look at the doctors. What do the doctors say? The doctor says, take the vaccines. Majority of the doctors say take the vaccines. Now this leads us to a question. And the question is, but we have doctors that say don't take the vaccines. And we have some rabbis that say don't take the vaccines. So what do you do? What do you do when you have two situations? When you have rabbis say one thing and a rabbi say another thing. It's machloket. Machloket in the doctors, machloket in the rabbis. What do you do? So we looked at two things. We look at numbers and we look at expertise. We look at numbers, we look at majority versus minority. We also look at expertise. Specialist versus, let's say, the regular doctors or regular, people in the field. We know both that in numbers, the majority of the doctors, the majority of the rabbis say to take it. The expertise, the specialists in the field, the doctors say to take it. The majority of the doctors say to take it. And again, bear with me of what my personal thoughts are. Rav Moshe Sternbach speaks about in the measles epidemic, that when you have an overwhelming majority of medical authorities who mandate vaccination, you are not allowed to choose the minority opinion. And he advised the people that advise against taking the vaccines. Now again, there are rabbis that are against the vaccine, and we're not getting really into that, per se. I want to put both sides out there. But majority say that you should do it. The effect of how bad this went out is that there was a letter that went out that there was a bunch of rabbis that said that you should not take the vaccine, and turned out that this document was a fake. One of the people on the letter was none other than Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. And Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky over there on the letter apparently said that he said that he should not take the vaccine. And he had to write a letter out and saying that I never gave such a psak. Meaning that people, I don't know how somebody could go and forge. These are people that believe in the rabbis, that believe in the Gedolim, and they forge what a rabbi says. Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky had to come out and says, I never gave this psak. And Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky says, each one should ask his own doctor. And that's my personal opinion. Each one should go and ask their own doctor. Yes, you have the majority of the Gedolim that says take the vaccine, which is where you should be leaning towards. But again, I'm not saying what my opinion is. And you have majority of the doctors that are saying that you should do it. And you have some people that go and they say, you know what, but maybe there's side effects. Maybe there's side effects. As of now, from my knowledge, from my information, no one died from the vaccine. You had people that did die from that vaccine, but they took the vaccine, but it was unrelated to the vaccine. One was from a heart attack, another was from multiple sclerosis, had nothing to do with the vaccine. Generally, the side effects that you have from the vaccine is usually mild fever, headache, weakness, soreness, like general symptoms of flu-like symptoms. There is a very rare anaphylaxis, reaction, and this is why there is a requirement that you stick around after the vaccine for 20 to 30 minutes to see if you have any reaction. And generally, people that have these types of reactions to vaccinations know that they have those types of reactions, and they should speak to the doctor as well. And this is what Rav Usher Weiss comes and brings down. Rav Usher Weiss, and by the way, I strongly recommend anybody to go and listen to Rav Usher Weiss. By the way, there's a lot of amazing Rabbanim that go and they speak about this. And you can go in Torah time, you look at Rav Usher Weiss, you look at Rabbi Shai Tahan. They speak about this extensively, beautifully on this, on this topic. And I strongly recommend to do proper research on this. And Rav Usher Weiss goes down and brings down that every new medicine or every new medical procedure might have long-term effects. And we have to try to strike the balance between what's needed right now and what could theoretically happen in the future. And Rav Usher Weiss goes and says, people are dying, people are suffering. We could alleviate this. There's a vaccine, and this is what we should do. That's how Rav Usher Weiss goes and says it. What we see over here, and again, I really want to put a sincere, apology for if my intent is not to go and insult people or make people feel bad if they believe in any of these things. That's really not my intent. My intent is really to try to bring information the way that it ought to be brought. A lot of people have presented this information in a very, very bad manner that is not real and consider this as facts. These are not facts, and I just wanted to put that information out there. So again, Mechila Sincere Apology. I know people, and I've gotten messages while I was saying this class, about that. I really don't mean to hurt or harm or offend anybody. The purpose of this is really to put the truth out there. What you really should do is speak to your local medical authoritative doctor and see what is the correct thing that you should do based on your own condition. Obviously, we look at the Gedolim, and Shira, we'll open up for questions in a minute. This is what you should be doing, and most importantly, don't waste your time with these conspiracy theories. Not only do they cause harm, they cause issues for people. You have to stay away from these things. I know this is a very controversial issue. I know this is something that is not easy to hear from many people. And again, my sincere apology if I offended, I hurt anybody. But this is what I felt was something that I needed to say, something I'd actually been pushing off. I didn't want to say, but something I felt that I needed. If there's something that I said that I was wrong, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to go and issue another video saying that I was wrong on something. This is not my expertise. I'm more than happy to do that. So please, if you have evidence that is wrong of what I said, please share with me, and I would share it with the public. I would post it, on one of my other classes. With that, let's open up to some questions. So there's a question over here regarding the liability of pharmaceutical companies that can't be sued and all these things. Now, granted, there are issues. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of issues, not only with vaccinations, with pharmacology, with pharmaceutical companies. There are plenty of issues. But we have to do what's best to do with the information that is given to us at hand. And this is where we are. This is the information at hand. Shira, I know you had a question, so go ahead.
I just wanted to back up what you said. Here in Memphis, Tennessee, we have the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, started by Danny Thomas, and they study cancer, and they just take care of children. My niece works for them, and I know, from her, that starting in January, when they saw this spreading, they dropped everything they were doing. And not only the St. Jude's Hospital, but research hospitals and research centers around the world dropped what they were doing and gathered together, and they were interconnected, passing information back and forth of their discoveries. And they were testing the St. Jude's employees starting in June.
Wow.
And this was on St. Jude's did the McDermott, did I say that right?
Moderna, yeah.
Yeah, they did that vaccine. So by the time they started giving the vaccines, here in January, they had spent 6-7 months on human trials.
Yeah.
So this is proof of how far science has come. They've got set things, like you said, that they go through, set steps that they could go through to come up with vaccines. And we have evolved so far in science that it doesn't take 10, 15 years to come up with a vaccine for something like this. So this isn't something they just came out with all of a sudden. It was a worldwide effort.
Agreed.
And a worldwide sharing of information, minute by minute by minute. So
100%.
it's been in human trial for a while.
Yeah, thank you, Shira. Thank you for that's the evidence that exists now. That's where we're holding it. Unfortunately, people are not looking at that, but that's the bottom line. That's the truth. Thank you for that. Any other questions? No? Okay, amazing. Chazak u'baruch. Okay.